Hello from WatchTime Magazine's event here in Manhattan. We are visiting Swiss-French brand Bell&Ross, which is what I've decided to wear today. I'm wearing their BR126 Heritage, which also happens to be my daily watch, and I enjoy it a lot. So Bell&Ross is a relatively new brand in the watch industry, founded in just 1992, and is heavily inspired on the aircraft industry. And not just the pilot watch that you saw there on my wrist, but also the instruments and dials from the aircraft themselves that you see here. So I think that's pretty fascinating how they've taken the idea of the aircraft-inspired watches and kind of took it a step further with the instrument dials versus just the vintage-looking pilot watches. So let's see what they got going on. Right, so this is the new vintage collection. So it's kind of like the older style pilot watches that we've seen from Bell&Ross, the World War I's, the World War II's, BR123's, BR126's, except obviously the new design, and they've actually introduced a new size. So all of these watches right here on the bottom row and in the middle row as well are going to retain that 41mm size that we're used to from their pilot watches, but the ones up here are actually going to drop down to a 38.5, which the watch market as a whole is starting to subtract millimeters, because I think people have noticed it's just gotten a bit too big in the past few years, almost silly big, you know, with 50mm watches and sometimes even bigger than that. I think people want that classic size, that timeless size that we saw from that 38 to 42mm range. But this watch right here is their gilt dial and is limited to 500 pieces and is definitely my favorite out of the entire collection. Something about the contrast between that beige dial, the black subdials, and the brown espresso strap just stands out to me more than the rest of these ones do. It's just a very classic and clean look. The design of the case is beautiful as well. Not that the rest of these watches are ugly or anything. That one's just definitely my favorite. But overall, a beautiful new collection from Bell&Ross for their pilot watches. Alright, now we're going to take a look at the style that makes Bell&Ross so famous, which is that instrument dial sort of style. We're going to look at two sizes primarily, 42mm and a 39mm. The 42mm is closer to my size. Mine's about a 41, but it's close. The difference being that these are square and mine is round, so we'll see that comparison. So the 39mm is actually new for Bell&Ross. Not the size, but the fact that there's an automatic movement in the 39mm. Traditionally, they'd have a wind-up or quartz, but since the industry's going back to those smaller watches, they've decided to put the automatic inside the 39mm. So this is sort of going to be like a comparison between the two sizes and how they look on a wrist. At least my wrist, which is a little bit smaller. So for you guys with the smaller wrist, this might help you out in terms of looking at the two sizes. So yeah, let's check it out. So this is the 39mm. They started to put automatic movements inside of these 39mm just because the demand of the customers were buying 39mm, so they decided to move the automatic into the 39mm as well.
It's perfect. So
that's how it looks on my wrist. I only have about a 6.5-inch wrist, so it's quite small. So the 39 actually looks better on my hand. I'll put the 42mm on too to show you size comparison.
And once that gets exposed to natural light or artificial, it's like a flashlight. Bright, bright, bright. You have a good wrist, so you can wear a big watch.
So this is the 42mm now. You can see obviously it's
this one is 30.
a little bit bigger
actually quite a bit bigger, but still looks good even on a small wrist like mine. It sits very nice. Despite it looking, I mean, it has the appearance of like a 45 millimeter or something like that, just because they actually measure from the circle diameter in the middle, and they don't include kind of the square lugs on the outside. So that's what gives it that presence of a bigger watch, but it actually fits very nice, and it is very comfortable on the wrist as well. It's actually very beautiful. Now if you look at mine, which is also a 42, it is actually the same size. It's just the squares give this one a little bit more presence. Beautiful there.
When I first started working with Graham, they were all like 48s, and now we got a lot of 44s, so I would definitely try it on because they're super comfortable, and you don't really notice when they're on. So you have that one there. So
what size is that right there?
it's a 44.
That's a 44?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's really and because the lugs are curved also, it fits very, very well on your wrist. So.
And it is good that the crown is in the opposite direction.
Yeah, so you're not knocking anything at all.
Right.
And you can function the chronograph with the trigger here. So basically it's extremely ergonomic because you're using your thumb to start and stop, and then you can use your thumb or your finger to reset as well. So this is so much stronger than the other fingers. You don't have to actually take your eyes off the action.
Right, I see
when
that.
You're starting and stopping, so...
That's smart. That's smart. That's a clever design.
That's what we try to think of.
Yeah, absolutely. So with these, is this like a new sort of release that you're doing?
Yeah, so we have all of these are new pieces for this year. The young ladies that you see here are inspired by the vintage nose art that were on the military planes in the Second World War, the sweetheart designs.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So we took that inspiration and we put them into 4 limited edition watches.
And they look good. They actually do.
They're very cute. They're not offensive. They're just really fun and adorable. So each one has a different name. So this is Sally. Mine is Lily. We have this one over here is Nina. And then we have one other one which is Anna. So that's this young lady here with the army uniform.
And what are they limited to?
100 pieces each.
100 pieces
worldwide.
Each?
Right, so also about this new nose art collection, you see with one of their standard watches versus one of their other limited edition watches, the standard watch right there has an open back, whereas that limited edition watch had a solid custom case back. So with this nose art collection, they're actually deciding to keep it as an open back, which in my opinion is a fantastic idea, just because the movement in these watches are just so special and so important to the watch that leaving it open is kind of a treat to see what's making your watch tick. So the movement that's actually in this watch is the G1747 automatic chronograph. It's 25 jeweled and I believe is a 48-hour power reserve. It's like the same movement that's in a lot of their other watches, but a fantastic movement it is. So leaving the case back open, in my opinion, is a great idea. Also, what's really cool about this limited collection of the nose art pieces is they're offering them for the same MSRP as their standard collections. So a watch that's more unique and special and only limited to 100 pieces each, you can get for the exact same price as just one of their standard watches, which I think is is pretty incredible. Definitely something to look into. But also, they didn't have it on display, but I wanted to mention one of their dive watches really quick. This thing is massive, so if you have a smaller wrist like me, it's probably not a good bet. But it's 45 millimeters, but pretty thick. Just an incredible piece because all functions work up to 2,000 feet. Now, if you're not too familiar with dive watches, that's not always the case. That all the functions will work up to what it's rated at. So an incredible piece and something to look at as well. And they also have the black with rose gold kind of color, which I think looks fantastic. As for a dive watch, not necessarily on the leather strap, but still looks good. And most divers that wear those don't really dive in them anyway, so.
So if you're in a 6-foot pool and your watch malfunctions, the crown, of course, has to be screwed down. Of course. But which is why with the trigger it makes it a lot harder to have the crown open. But with a lot of brands, it's about withstanding the watch under perfect laboratory conditions.
Right.
It can withstand 2,000 feet. No one's going 2,000 feet, but you want to be able to build it to withstand that. If I was lowering it down,
Right.
slowly,
Okay.
as the pressure's building up within the case. That's why they all have helium escape valves.
So another piece from the Graham Vintage Collection is this aircraft piece right here. It's limited to 250 pieces, has the same movement as the nose art piece, so another fantastic movement. It's absolutely gorgeous design, heavily inspired again by military and aircraft. The crown, despite it looking huge and uncomfortable, the way they designed it, you can actually not even feel it, so that's a huge plus. The watch comes in 4 different colors, so you have your choice, and it's absolutely beautiful in my opinion.
So we have a smaller moon-based piece that's slimmer in steel. But this is mostly the regular collection that we have.
Right. And of course, obviously, with the Bell&Ross, I do love the more the airplane kind of design.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that.
Like the pilot's watch style.
Absolutely, like with and like you said, the divots on there are beautiful.
Yeah.
They add that much more to the watch, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. I think they did a really great job of presenting that.
And you said the PVD on this is aged. Like, what do you mean by that?
Gray, and they've given it sort of an age look, so it looks more vintage.
Oh, smart.
Yeah. So instead of making it just
like a glossy matte black,
exactly, it seems more fitting with the era that it's representing.
Makes sense. That makes sense.
So the last piece that I wanted to look at today is the Graham Chronofighter Superlight. It comes in the skeleton dial that you see here and the more full face that you see on the outside here. I kind of like this full dial better because you get to see more carbon fiber, which is never a bad thing. The watch comes in weighing at 98 grams, so definitely lives up to that Superlight name. Comes with the same movement as the other watches, the G1747 movement, and it's just in a little bit bigger of a case, the 47mm versus the 44mm case. With carbon fiber being such a statement piece right now, being seen in everything from supercar Ferraris to the luxury Rolls Royces that don't really need it, just cool to look at, definitely a cool piece to have. Very beautiful watch by Graham, and that's really it.